Eleanor Carter never imagined her life would spiral into a whirlwind of heartbreak, betrayal, and unspeakable survival. One fateful night, cast out on the cold, unforgiving streets, she found herself giving birth in an empty alley with no help in sight. Her millionaire ex-partner, Adrian Davenport, was nowhere to be found. Yet destiny had other plans. Months later they would come face to face again, but this time under the glaring lights of a courtroom, with the relentless echo of a judge's gavel thundering in the background. Prepare for an unforgettable journey entwined with secrets, scandals, and a relentless quest for justice that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Elena Carter had grown accustomed to the noises of the city, the taxi horns, distant sirens, and the electric hum of street lamps. But on this particular night, every sound felt amplified. The cold seeped through her tattered coat, chilling her to the bone. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she clutched her swollen belly. She stumbled through the dark alley, breath coming in quick, shallow gasps, searching for any sign of help. Her mind raced with a single, frantic question. Where is Adrian? He had promised to be there for her, to protect her and their unborn child. But as her due date approached, the phone calls stopped and the texts never came. The man who once swore his undying love vanished without a trace. At first, Elena believed he was busy handling the affairs of Davenport Holdings. Adrian was, after all, the youngest heir to a formidable business empire. He spent his days attending endless meetings at the family firm's head office in Chicago's Loop, dining with politicians and rubbing shoulders at exclusive galas. She brushed aside her doubts, clinging to the idea that once his work settled, he would return to her side. But here she was alone in labor and desperately hoping for a miracle. The contraction hit her with brutal force. Elena collapsed against a graffiti-covered wall, gritting her teeth so hard she feared they might crack. She had no phone. She had no one to call. She'd pawned her last valuable possession, her mother's locket, just to afford a few nights at a run-down motel. But now even that was gone. She looked up and down the deserted alley, praying someone might pass by. Her pleas were swallowed by the roar of an approaching train overhead. In that suffocating moment, Eleanor realized she would have to deliver her baby by herself. Panic seized her heart, but a fierce maternal instinct also flooded her veins. She forced herself to breathe, to remember the techniques she'd read about months ago. As another contraction racked her body, Eleanor screamed into the darkness. She felt the baby descending, a sensation both terrifying and miraculous. She removed her coat, spreading it on the cold, damp pavement. The city's neon glow illuminated the graffiti around her, and she felt for a fleeting second that this heart-breakingly surreal scene might be the end of her. But she pushed forward, determined to bring her child into the world, no matter the cost. A sudden wave of relief swept over Elena when she heard a faint voice from the mouth of the alley. An elderly man who introduced himself as Mr. Harold James, wearing a threadbare trench coat, had heard her cries. Under normal circumstances, he might have hurried on, fearful of city dangers, but something compelled him to step forward. Crouching beside Elena, he offered nothing more than a few words of encouragement, and trembling hands he admitted he knew next to nothing about childbirth. But in that moment, compassion was all Eleanor needed. With Harold's help, she tore open the hem of her dress to fashion makeshift swaddling cloths. Every nerve in her body felt aflame. She let out a raw, guttural scream. And then finally a new voice joined the piercing cry of her newborn daughter. Elena cradled the tiny infant against her chest, tears mingling with the sweat on her face. Harold rummaged through his pockets, eventually producing a clean handkerchief to gently wipe the baby's face. In the faint glow of a flickering streetlight, Eleanor cast at her child a rush of love, overwhelming the pain and desperation. She whispered a single name: Hope. In the days that followed, Eleanor's world was a fragile balancing act between survival and caring for her newborn. Mr. James, true to his unassuming kindness, led Elena to a makeshift shelter hidden beneath the overpass. The shelter, run by a small non-profit, offered warmth and anonymity. Two things she desperately needed. She tried to contact Adrian, but the line she had for him was constantly busy or disconnected. When she called Davenport Holdings, she was met with polite yet dismissive secretaries who claimed they had never heard of her. During those sleepless nights while cradling hope close, Eleanor wondered what she had done to deserve such abandonment. And yet she clung to a slender thread of optimism. Adrian was a man of ambition, recognized as a wunderkind in the financial world, a graduate of Harvard Business School, a subject of numerous articles in Forbes and The Guardian. He was adored by the public for his philanthropic endeavors and charm. Elena reasoned that the man she knew, gentle caring, couldn't have simply disappeared on purpose. But as she discovered an outdated newspaper article featuring Adrian at the Ritz-Carlton Gala with another woman on his arm, her doubts exploded into heartbreak. Had he truly replaced her? Or was there something deeper at play? The shelter manager, Teresa Alvarez, took pity on Elena's plight. She reached out to local charities, including one run by the city's Department of Human Services, in hopes of securing more permanent assistance for Elena and her newborn. The endless forms and administrative hoops felt like navigating a labyrinth. But Elena's determination never wavered. Between feedings, Elena poured every ounce of energy she had into finding work. Most potential employers turned her away the moment they saw her baby in tow. A sympathetic waitress position offered by a local diner was short-lived when Hope developed colic, and Elena's frequent absences to soothe her daughter resulted in abrupt termination. At night, Eleanor often found herself awake, listening to the distant hum of late-night traffic, reliving the sweet memories with Adrian. She remembered the penthouse parties at the Drake Hotel, the spontaneous weekend trips to Napa Valley, and the times he used to whisper promises of a life filled with love and security. How could that same man leave her to fend for herself in the cold streets of Chicago? Desperation fueled her. She wrote letters addressed directly to Adrian's personal penthouse, even slipping one under the doors of Davenport Holdings. Silence remained her only reply. Behind the walls of Davenport Holdings, Adrian's world was equally tumultuous, though in a very different way. After his father's sudden passing from a heart attack, Adrian found himself in the crosshairs of board members, executives, and opportunistic relatives who all questioned whether he had the mettle to steer the Davenport empire. He spent long nights buried in financial reports, ironically unaware that just a few miles away, Eleanor was fighting to keep their newborn daughter fed and warm. Whenever thoughts of Elena surfaced, her radiant smile, her unwavering belief in him, he tried to dismiss them. The memory of their argument, the hurt on her face as he walked out the door, weighed heavily on him. Yet he convinced himself he was doing the right thing by focusing on the business. Meanwhile, Adrian's best friend and personal attorney, Mark Henderson, cautioned him repeatedly. "If Eleanor is pregnant, you need to address it," Mark insisted. Ignoring the possibility could lead to legal trouble down the road. But Adrian, grappling with his own insecurities and illusions of betrayal, brushed aside his friend's concerns. With the entire Davenport board pressuring him to secure a profitable merger, Adrian allowed his personal life to remain an unresolved mystery. Winter arrived mercilessly in Chicago, the sub-zero winds cutting across Lake Michigan and leaving ice crystals in their wake. For Elena and her baby, warmth was a luxury they could seldom afford. Through the non-profit's coordination, they secured a small room in a halfway house. The cramped space, flaking walls and drafty windows were far from ideal, but Elena found a glimmer of hope in having a door to lock at night. Every morning she dressed Hope in layers of donated clothes before braving the frigid streets to search for work. She handed out resumes at fast food chains, retail stores, and even administrative offices. Most places either ignored her or expressed sympathy before showing her the door. "We'll keep your application on file," they'd say, their eyes betraying a pity she loathed. One fateful day, after trudging through a blizzard, Eleanor collapsed on the sidewalk, her body shaking from exhaustion. A passerby named Patricia Locke, an off-duty social worker, found her and immediately called an ambulance. At Mount Sinai Hospital, doctors discovered severe anemia, dehydration, and signs of malnourishment. For Elena, the hospital bed and the gentle hum of machines offered a fleeting sense of safety, even if Hope's cries in the nursery reminded her that they still had an uphill battle to fight. While Elena recovered at Mount Sinai, Patricia Locke, the caring social worker who found her, visited every day. She brought small comforts, a cozy blanket for Hope, a set of baby bottles, and offered a compassionate ear. It was Patricia who first gently suggested legal counsel. "Eleanor," Patricia said one afternoon, "you have rights, and so does your daughter. If Adrian Davenport is truly the father, you need to consider seeking child support or any financial help the law might provide." The mention of Adrian's name triggered a wave of conflicting emotions in Eleanor: anger, sorrow, and a glimmer of lingering love. She had been too proud, or perhaps too frightened, to consider legal action before. The mere idea of dragging her once-beloved partner into court felt like another betrayal of her hopes for a reconciled family. But she had to face the reality her baby needed stability, and she was running out of ways to provide it alone. By the time Elena was discharged, Patricia had connected her with a pro bono legal clinic. There, Elena was introduced to Marcia Bradshaw, a determined young attorney with kind eyes who specialized in family law. And with that single step, the trajectory of Elena's world began to shift. Marcia Bradshaw's office was modest, nestled in a worn-out building housing various non-profits. Unlike the gleaming high-rises of Davenport Holdings, the space here was cramped and the elevator often broken. But Elena immediately felt at ease. There was an air of sincerity in Marcia's posture as she gestured for Elena to sit. As Elena recounted her story, Marcia listened intently, scribbling notes on a yellow legal pad. The attorney's brow furrowed when Elena described giving birth alone in an alley, and the subsequent silence from Adrian. "If Adrian Davenport is the father," Marcia said carefully, "we can pursue a paternity test, child support, and potentially more. But you must be prepared for a fight. The Davenports are powerful, and they're not going to roll out a welcome mat." Fear and resolve wrestled within Elena. She cradled hope as the baby fussed her cries, echoing through the cramped room. Elena knew she was venturing into uncharted territory, a world of court documents and depositions, but she no longer had the luxury of choice. Leaving Marcia's office, Elena felt a rush of anxious determination. The protective walls she'd tried to build around her heartbreak were slowly giving way to a new resolve. "I will fight for my daughter's future." The day the official letter arrived at Davenport Holdings was one Adrian would never forget. The engraved envelope, bore Marcia Bradshaw's name and the words "Notice of Paternity and Child Support Hearing." Adrian stared at the letter, his mind racing, heart pounding as he read through the legal jargon. He felt a maelstrom of emotions. Anger at the sudden intrusion into his carefully curated life. Guilt for having let things spiral so far. And a strange flicker of relief that at last the question of Elena would be addressed. He remembered how he once imagined proposing to her on a yacht in the Adriatic Sea. How he had envisioned a future of laughter and children running around an estate in Lake Forest. That dream had evaporated into thin air, replaced by board meetings and silent phone calls. Mark Henderson, Adrian's attorney and friend, read the document over his shoulder. "You need to deal with this carefully," Mark warned. "If the test proves the child is yours, you can't ignore it. Not legally, not morally." Without responding, Adrian set the letter aside, fists clenched. He felt cornered and betrayed, yet he couldn't deny an inexplicable ache in his chest. A child. His child. That realization would change everything. Elena's first court hearing was scheduled at the Cook County Circuit Court. The antique architecture of the courthouse, with its towering pillars and hushed halls, made her feel both insignificant and strangely hopeful. She clutched hope tightly, trying to focus on the rhythmic breathing of her baby, rather than the hammering of her own heart. Anxiety pinned her to her seat in the waiting area. She wasn't dressed in designer clothing or accompanied by a legal entourage. All she had was Marcia by her side. She couldn't help but recall the glittering galas she had once attended with Adrian. It seemed surreal that she was now about to face him in a courtroom. When Adrian finally arrived, Elena felt her breath hitch. He looked every bit the polished millionaire-tailored suit, polished shoes, cool confidence. Yet in his eyes, she glimpsed a flicker of something that looked a lot like regret. The hearing was brief. Judge Isaac Moretti, known for his stern demeanor, listened attentively as Marcia outlined the need for an immediate paternity test. Adrian's legal team, led by a seasoned lawyer named Robert King, tried to dismiss the case as a baseless claim. But Judge Moretti ordered the test without hesitation, setting in motion the legal machinery that would forever link their fates. The paternity test results came back positive. Adrian Davenport was indeed Hope's father. The news spread through the corridors of Davenport Holdings like wildfire, fueling office gossip and shaking the family's pristine image. Adrian's stepmother, Lucinda Davenport, practically frothed at the mouth with indignation, convinced Elena was nothing more than a cunning gold digger. Behind closed doors, Adrian's board of directors were not pleased either. The timing could not have been worse. Davenport Holdings was on the cusp of closing a multi-million-dollar deal with Morgan Stanley, and shareholders feared negative press might jeopardize the negotiations. Whispers of damage control echoed in the executive suites, while social media buzzed with rumors, speculation, and paparazzi snapshots. For Elena, the test result was a bittersweet vindication. She had never doubted who Hope's father was, but seeing the official paperwork gave her a momentary surge of courage. Marcia assured her that the next steps formalizing child support, possibly negotiating custody rights, were well within her legal claims. Still, a pang of sadness clung to her. Despite her anger and hurt, a small part of her had yearned for an apology or some show of remorse from Adrian that went beyond mere legal obligation. But for now, the fight had only just begun, as the public eye turned toward the unfolding drama media outlets, scrambled for angles. The Chicago Tribune ran a headline, "Millionaire Heir, Adrian Davenport," in paternity scandal. Talk shows, tabloid websites, and social media hashtags proliferated. Meanwhile, Elena found herself fending off reporters who camped outside the shelter, where she sometimes volunteered, eager to snap pictures of her with hope. Marcia advised Elena to maintain privacy and focus on the court proceedings, but the relentless intrusion weighed on her. She worried about how the press would frame her story. She was not a schemer, nor was she some naive girl chasing a wealthy man's fortune. She was simply a mother, fighting for her child's rightful support. Adrian, on the other hand, had spun into a crisis management frenzy. Robert King arranged a discreet meeting with Marcia to gauge the possibility of settling out of court. They proposed a lump sum of money in exchange for full custody, hoping to shield the Davenport name from ongoing scandal. Eleanor was appalled by the suggestion that she might sell her child to a father who had been absent throughout her pregnancy and her daughter's early months. For Elena, the lines were clear. She wanted Adrian to be involved in Hope's life, but not at the cost of being pushed aside like an inconvenience. A crucial turning point arrived when Marcia scheduled a mediation session. The goal was to see if a compromise could be reached without dragging the matter through a drawn-out trial. The sterile conference room in the courthouse felt suffocating, its white walls echoing even the slightest shuffle of papers. Eleanor sat on one side with Marcia. Adrian, flanked by Robert King, occupied the other. The mediator, a soft-spoken woman named Linda Moore, explained the process. "We're here to see if there's a middle ground," she said, her gentle tone attempting to melt the icy tension. Elena expected Adrian to open with a tirade or an accusation. Instead, he surprised her. I never meant for it to get to this," he began haltingly. I thought you'd moved on. I didn't know you were homeless or struggling. If I had known He trailed off, his eyes flickering with guilt. For a second, Eleanor felt her heart soften. She recalled the tenderness he once showed her, the man who never hesitated to hold her hand in public, who spoke of building a family someday. But then she remembered the labor pains, the cold alley, and the desperate nights. That memory hardened her resolve. A real apology wasn't enough. She needed a sincere commitment to her and Hope's well-being. The mediation session ended without a resolution. Adrian insisted he wanted to be part of Hope's life, but Robert King recommended that Elena relinquish physical custody in exchange for generous financial compensation. Elena stood firm, refusing to let Adrian come and go at will, without shouldering true parental responsibility. Outside the courthouse, media photographers snapped pictures capturing the tension etched on Elena's face and the discomfort in Adrian's posture. Headlines spun wildly: heirs, love child, sparks. Heated custody battle. Mother of Davenport. Baby rejects lavish settlement. Elena returned to her cramped room that night, emotionally drained. Though she believed she was making the right choices for Hope, fear gnawed at her. She worried about the financial might of the Davenport family, their ability to drag her through an endless legal process. Would she be forced into a settlement just to keep her daughter secure? After putting Hope to sleep, Elena found a quiet moment to look through old photographs. She remembered happier days, times when Adrian would spin her around the living room while jazz music played in the background. Those memories felt like a lifetime ago. Resolute and exhausted, she reminded herself of the life she wanted to build for her daughter, a life free from fear and uncertainty. Tensions soared as the custody hearing approached. Judge Moretti had ordered a child services evaluation to assess both parents' living conditions and emotional capacity to care for Hope. A social worker named Clara Nolan visited Elena's humble accommodations, noting the cleanliness and the bond between mother and child, despite the limited resources. A week later, Clara arrived at Adrian's penthouse, located in a prestigious building overlooking Lake Michigan. The interior was immaculate, polished marble floors, high ceilings, and unobstructed view of the city skyline. But as Clara carefully asked Adrian questions about his role as a father, his responses seemed practiced as if guided by legal coaching. Behind the scenes, Adrian struggled. On one hand, he genuinely wanted to connect with the daughter he'd only just discovered. On the other, he felt immense pressure from his family and corporate obligations. There were times he'd slip away to his private office, gazing at the paternity test results, and wondering what kind of father he could be if he barely knew how to slow down. When Clara concluded her visits, she prepared a thorough report for the court, one that would weigh heavily in determining custody arrangements. Both Elena and Adrian braced themselves, not knowing which way the scales of justice would tip. The morning of the custody hearing dawned grey and chilly, reflecting the mood that enveloped the courthouse. Journalists lined the entrance cameras, flashing with relentless curiosity. Elena felt faint, her stomach churning from a mix of nerves and residual hunger. She'd skipped breakfast, having lost her appetite. In the courtroom, Judge Moretti wasted no time. Clara Nolan's report highlighted that while Adrian could offer financial stability and a luxurious environment, he had yet to demonstrate any hands-on parenting skills. Elena, on the other hand, had been the sole caregiver, albeit in impoverished circumstances, showing unwavering devotion to the child's welfare. Marcia argued passionately that Hope deserved not just money, but emotional security. She insisted that uprooting the infant from her mother's care would be traumatic. Robert King countered, emphasizing Adrian's resources and willingness to employ the best nannies, tutors, and medical specialists. He framed it as an opportunity for Hope to flourish in ways that Elena could never provide. Judge Moretti listened carefully, his face unreadable. After hours of testimony and legal arguments, he announced that he would take the matter under advisement. The final decision would be pronounced in a week's time. Eleanor exited the courtroom with her heart pounding, wondering if she would lose the only family she had left. As the days ticked by, Elena found herself swinging between fragile hope and crushing dread. The media coverage intensified, and she even discovered online forums where people debated her life like a soap opera, some branding her a gold digger, others calling Adrian a deadbeat father. Adrian retreated into isolation. He cancelled public appearances, delegated board responsibilities, and spent long hours alone in his penthouse. Each evening, he replayed memories of Elena in his mind, the warmth of her laughter, the strength she possessed even in adversity. Guilt coiled within him, especially when he thought about how he'd cut her off without an explanation. One evening, rummaging through old photo albums, Adrian stumbled upon a note Eleanor had once slipped into his briefcase, a small letter filled with her dreams for their future. Her handwriting read, "I believe in you. I believe in us." Adrian felt tears sting his eyes. He realized, perhaps too late, that his misguided attempts to shield his inheritance and reputation had cost him the one person who believed in his better self. With renewed determination, Adrian picked up the phone and dialed Mark Henderson's number. "I want to make this right," he said quietly, feeling the weight of each syllable. "Tell me how." The next day, Marcia's phone rang. On the line was Mark Henderson proposing a private meeting between Adrian and Eleanor without the glare of the media or the influence of attorneys. Marcia hesitated, but eventually agreed, sensing that dialogue might bridge the chasm between them. Elena was skeptical. She didn't want another meeting where Adrian's lawyer waved large checks in her face. But Marcia convinced her that maybe, just maybe, Adrian had finally seen the light. So on a chilly Friday evening, under the discreet arrangement of Mark and Marcia, Eleanor took a taxi to a small cafe in an unassuming part of town. Adrian was already waiting, hunched over a table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He stood up the moment Elena entered, his eyes immediately darting to the infant carrier in her arms. Hope was asleep, her tiny nose peeking out from beneath a knitted pink hat. For a tense moment, neither spoke. Then in a hushed tone, Adrian broke the silence. "She's beautiful." He hesitantly reached out, brushing a gentle fingertip across Hope's tiny hand. Elena's heart constricted. In that moment, she saw not the millionaire heir, but a father astonished by his child. They sat down, words tumbling out hesitantly at first, but soon flowing. Apologies, regrets, confessions of fear and pride. Outside the wind howled, but inside that modest cafe, a fragile truce began to form. Elena left the cafe feeling as if she had just stepped off a roller coaster. She and Adrian had talked for hours about the lost months, her homelessness, the labor in an alley, his blind ambition, and the manipulative counsel of those around him. Despite her lingering anger, she couldn't deny that Adrian seemed genuine in his remorse, his eyes brimming with emotion whenever Hope made a tiny cooing sound. Though no concrete agreement was forged, they had taken a step closer to understanding. Adrian promised Elena that he would no longer hide behind the corporate fortress. If the court granted joint custody, he vowed to be a present father to ensure that Hope knew he loved her. That night, Elena returned to the shelter with Hope asleep in her arms. She felt conflicted. Her brain still cautioned her not to let her guard down, reminding her of the heartbreak she'd endured. Yet her heart yearned to believe that Adrian could be the partner and father he once promised to be. A new thought nestled into her mind. Perhaps the best scenario for Hope would be a cooperative relationship. But cooperation required trust, and trust was something they'd both shattered. For now, all she could do was wait for the court's ruling and see if Adrian's actions matched his words. On the day of the final custody decision, the tension within the courtroom was palpable. Lawyers stood at their respective tables, thick files and documents stacked high. Photographers waited outside, hungry for a shot that could capture victory or defeat. Judge Moretti took his seat, scanning the room before beginning. In the matter of Davenport versus Carter, regarding custody of the minor. Hope Carter, I have reviewed the Child Services report, listened to both parties, and considered the best interest of the child. His voice resonated with authority. Elena clenched her hands tightly. Marcia placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Adrian sat across from them, posture rigid. The judge explained that Hope deserved the love and care of both parents, provided each demonstrated fitness and genuine commitment. To that end, Judge Moretti continued, I am granting joint legal custody to both parties. Physical custody will remain primarily with Ms. Carter, given her demonstrated role as the primary caregiver. Mr. Davenport is granted visitation rights with a review scheduled in 6 months to determine if expanded custody is appropriate. Eleanor felt a surge of relief wash over her, tears pooling in her eyes. Adrian exhaled sharply, a complex mix of relief and resolve settling over him. The gavel's echo signaled a new chapter in their unfolding saga. In the days that followed the court's decision, Adrian took immediate steps to prove his commitment. He arranged for a modest but comfortable apartment for Eleanor and Hope, covering the lease so they no longer had to rely on the cramped quarters of the shelter. Initially, Elena resisted. She worried that accepting Adrian's help would become a new chain binding her to his will. But Marcia gently counseled that stable housing was essential for Hope's well-being, and Elena begrudgingly accepted. Still, she set boundaries. She refused to accept a personal driver or a credit card. "I want to stand on my own feet," she insisted. Adrian respected that choice, albeit with lingering concern. For Adrian, transitioning into fatherhood was humbling and at times awkward. He'd show up on weekends with groceries, baby toys, and books he was reading on how to care for infants. He took to heart every detail Elena offered: how to hold Hope correctly, how to burp her, how to recognize her different cries. Bit by bit, he caught glimpses of the daily struggles Elena endured: the midnight feedings, the diapers, the constant worry over money. With each late-night bottle he prepared, and each lullaby he learned, Adrian felt a foreign yet comforting sense of purpose awakening in him. As Hope reached 6 months old, her giggles and coos transformed the once quiet apartment into a place of joy and promise. Elena found part-time work at a local community center, helping to organize charity drives for families in need, a role that resonated deeply with her recent experiences. With Adrian's financial support for childcare, she could finally balance work and motherhood. Their co-parenting arrangement wasn't without its challenges. Adrian's demanding schedule sometimes caused him to miss scheduled visits, igniting Elena's frustration. In turn, Elena's pride often made it difficult to accept gifts or assistance beyond the bare minimum. They argued occasionally, old wounds and mistrust surfacing at the worst moments. Yet amid the strain, a growing sense of mutual respect emerged. Adrian discovered that being a father wasn't just about providing resources. It was about being present, listening to the stories of Hope's milestones, her first attempt at crawling her discovery of how to clap her hands with delight. Elena learned that she could lean on someone else without forfeiting her independence or identity. Slowly but steadily, they formed a tentative partnership focused on Hope's happiness, and in fleeting moments they caught themselves smiling at each other, recalling a lost tenderness that once bound them together. Just when things seemed to be reaching a fragile equilibrium, fate threw another curveball. A letter arrived from the Davenport family's legal team, informing Adrian that his extended family intended to challenge his ability to lead Davenport Holdings. Rumors of scandal and poor judgment swirled among board members. The story of Adrian's love child had dampened investor confidence, and certain factions within the company wanted him removed as CEO before the upcoming annual shareholder meeting. Adrian felt torn. The pressure from the board forced him into endless strategy sessions, leaving him little time for his newly formed paternal duties. Stress and sleepless nights once again plagued him, only this time the thought of losing his daughter's blossoming trust felt more terrifying than losing the company. Elena noticed Adrian's sudden absences, the unread texts, the last-minute cancellations. Old anxieties gnawed at her. Was he pulling away again when life became too complicated? But one night, Adrian showed up at the apartment unannounced, eyes dark with exhaustion. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "they're trying to oust me from the company. If I lose my position, I lose my standing, and with that I might lose credibility in court if custody is revisited." In that moment, Eleanor saw past his polished exterior to the vulnerable man she once loved. She felt a rush of sympathy, remembering her own struggles for survival. They were both fighting battles, each in a different arena, but connected by the same driving force, Hope's future. Determined not to let external forces tear them apart, Adrian and Elena found themselves working together in an unexpected way. While Adrian battled board politics, Elena, in her own quiet manner, stepped forward to defend him publicly. She gave a small interview to a local reporter, someone she trusted from her volunteer work, clarifying that Adrian was not the villain that tabloids painted him to be. "I won't deny our history is complicated," Elena said, cradling hope on her lap during the interview. "But Adrian Davenport has been stepping up as a father. He's learning, he's trying, and that means more to me than his net worth ever could." The interview went viral, eliciting mixed reactions. Some cynics claimed Elena had been bought off, while others admired her honesty. Yet the simple act of standing up for Adrian resonated with key investors who saw a different side of him. A man willing to own his mistakes and grow from them. As the annual shareholder meeting approached, the tension mounted. Adrian prepared presentations, gathered supportive statements, and readied a contingency plan if all else failed. At the same time, Elena braced herself for the possibility that the stability they'd just begun to enjoy might come crashing down should Adrian lose control of Davenport Holdings. The day of the shareholder meeting arrived with all the drama of a high-stakes showdown. The boardroom at Davenport Holdings was buzzing with tension. Rows of leather chairs faced a large screen displaying financial graphs and corporate forecasts. Major investors from across the globe dialed in via video conference. Adrian presented his case, a transparent look at Davenport Holdings' performance under his leadership growth metrics and future plans. His voice was calm but firm, addressing controversies head-on. He even touched upon the paternity case, emphasizing that while the media had sensationalized his personal life, it had not impacted the company's profitability or strategic vision. Then, one by one, board members asked questions, some supportive, others accusatory. Lucinda Davenport. His stepmother led the charge to remove him, claiming he lacked the moral fiber to represent the company. Adrian countered calmly, reminding everyone that personal matters should not outweigh professional competence. In a surprising twist, Mark Henderson, Adrian's personal attorney, stood to share statements from philanthropic organizations praising Adrian's renewed commitment to social causes, some of which Elena had encouraged him to support. Slowly, the atmosphere shifted. By the time the final vote was taken, it was announced that Adrian would retain his position as CEO, winning by a narrow margin. Relief washed over him, but as he walked out of the boardroom, he knew this was only one victory in a much larger battle for redemption. That evening, Adrian arrived at Elena's apartment with a bouquet of lilies, her favorite flower. While the gesture was simple, it was the first time in months he'd shown up for a reason other than fatherly duties or crisis management. Elena welcomed him inside, noticing the weariness etched on his face. They sat in the small living room, the sound of Hope's lullaby machine humming softly from the bedroom. Adrian recounted the day's events, the tension, the accusations, the final vote. Elena listened, relieved that he'd managed to hold on to his leadership role. In the quiet that followed, she found herself reminiscing aloud about their early days, the time they tried tandem skydiving in Nevada, the quiet mornings, sipping coffee on his penthouse balcony, how he would whisper jokes just to make her laugh. Adrian smiled sadly, acknowledging how far they had strayed from those moments. A flicker of vulnerability passed between them. For Elena, it was both comforting and unsettling. She realized they were no longer the starry-eyed couple they once were. Too many harsh realities had tested their bond. Yet in that fleeting moment, the possibility of forging a new relationship built on honesty and shared responsibility didn't seem so impossible. Over the following weeks, Adrian gradually transitioned into a more present, engaged father. No longer buried beneath the avalanche of corporate obligations, he restructured his schedule, hiring trusted deputies to manage the day-to-day operations of Davenport Holdings. That decision gave him something money couldn't buy: time. And he poured that time into being with Hope. He arrived early on weekends, often surprising Elena with breakfast in hand, usually slightly cold, but the thought warmed her. Together they experienced milestones that most parents took for granted. Adrian was there when Hope giggled uncontrollably at her first bubble bath, and when she tried to crawl only to topple face first onto a plush rug. He laughed, cheered, and even cried when Hope uttered her first word. Mama Eleanor teased him for pouting, but secretly she was touched by how deeply he cared. The community center where Elena worked was preparing for its biggest event, yet a charity gala supporting homeless mothers and children. It was a cause deeply personal to her, and she'd spent months helping to organize every detail. Nervously, she handed Adrian an invitation one evening. "You don't have to come," she said quickly. "It's small, nothing like the Davenport Foundation galas you're used to." Adrian studied the invitation. "Elena, if this matters to you, it matters to me." He insisted on donating, but she was firm. "Do it anonymously. I don't want anyone to think I'm parading you around for donations." He smiled. "Then I'll show up and clap the loudest when you take the mic." At the gala, Elena wore a simple yet elegant navy blue dress borrowed from the center's donation wardrobe. She moved gracefully between guests, sharing her story without embellishing the tragedy or martyring herself. Sometimes life breaks you open so that light can get in. She told one donor eyes, briefly glancing toward Hope, sleeping in her stroller nearby. Adrian, standing at the edge of the crowd, watched her in awe. The woman he once saw only through the lens of romance had transformed into something even more formidable. An advocate, a leader, a survivor. After her speech, which ended with a standing ovation, Eleanor found Adrian waiting for her in the hallway, holding 2 cups of punch and looking slightly overwhelmed. "You were incredible," he said. "Honestly, I've never been prouder." Elena looked at him, unsure how to respond. So much had passed between them. Betrayal, distance, hardship. But in that moment, she saw none of it. She saw a man slowly shedding his armor, trying to rebuild what he had once destroyed. Later that night after the event, as they sat on Elena's couch, while Hope slept soundly in her crib, they spoke of dreams not just for their daughter, but for themselves. Not the extravagant kind from their past, but quiet, meaningful ones, starting a literacy program at the center, traveling someday with Hope, maybe even writing a children's book together. Though the future remained uncertain, the bond between them deepened, forged not through romance but resilience. And from that place, something new began to bloom. One crisp autumn afternoon, golden leaves spiraled down from the trees as Adrian took Elena and Hope on a quiet outing to the Chicago Botanic Garden. The air carried the faint scent of pine and earth, and laughter floated on the breeze from nearby families enjoying the rare sunny day. Hope, now full of energy and curiosity, sat in her stroller wide-eyed at every fluttering leaf and blooming petal, pointing and babbling in delight. Adrian pushed the stroller gently while Elena walked beside him. Their steps unhurried for the first time in a long while. The sunlight glinted through the trees, casting shifting patterns on the path. It felt almost surreal after all the months of legal battles, sleepless nights and heartbreak, to be here in a moment so peaceful and undisturbed. They paused near a small pond where ducks drifted lazily across the surface. Adrian reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a few breadcrumbs he'd brought along. "Let's give her her first duck-feeding memory," he said, smiling as he handed a few crumbs to Elena and crouched beside Hope. The little girl squealed with glee as Adrian helped her toss them into the water. When they found a shaded bench beneath a tall oak tree, Elena sat down and leaned back, watching as Adrian continued to entertain Hope with silly faces and animated animal sounds. The bond between them had grown stronger, unmistakably genuine. Elena couldn't deny how far Adrian had come, not just in court appearances or financial responsibility, but in the daily unglamorous moments of fatherhood. Adrian eventually joined her on the bench, sitting close, but careful not to presume too much. There was a long silence before he spoke. "I've been thinking," he said, eyes fixed on Hope, playing with a leaf in her tiny hands. "About everything. How far we've come, and how far I still need to go." Elena turned her head toward him, listening intently. "I know I can't rewrite the past," he continued, "but I want to build something better for her, for us. I'm not talking about a perfect family wrapped in a bow. I know we're not there, but maybe we could try again. Not just as co-parents, but as something more." Elena felt her breath catch slightly. She looked down at their intertwined hands, remembering every low point, the alley, the courtroom, the nights when she doubted she could survive. And yet here he was, not the arrogant millionaire she had once feared, but a man learning to love with humility and care. "I don't have an answer right now," she said softly, brushing a wind-blown curl from her face. "But I'm willing to keep walking forward with you. One step at a time." Adrian nodded slowly, clearly moved. "That's all I could hope for." As the sun dipped lower and the shadows lengthened, the three of them sat in quiet harmony, watching the ducks glide across the pond. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was real. It was healing, and it was theirs. 3 months later, the sharp bite of winter had returned, but Elena Carter no longer feared the cold. She stood inside a modest but warm townhouse nestled on a quiet street in Evanston, a far cry from the shelter beds and crumbling walls of her past. The house was part of a new chapter she and Adrian had begun, one rooted not in old promises, but in careful progress. They had agreed to co-parent under one roof, not as lovers, but as partners in raising their daughter. Separate bedrooms, separate routines, but shared goals and growing respect. Hope toddled across the hardwood floor in mismatched socks, giggling as she clutched her favorite stuffed bear. Adrian sat cross-legged nearby, trying to baby-proof the bookshelf with instructions that might as well have been written in Greek. "These screws are evil," he muttered, prompting a laugh from Elena as she walked in with 2 mugs of tea. They still clashed now and then over money, over chores, over what constituted a suitable bedtime snack. But unlike before, they had learned how to listen. Arguments no longer escalated into cold silences. Instead, they ended with open conversations and quiet apologies. It was messy, imperfect, and very human. Their evenings had taken on a quiet rhythm. After Hope's bath, they'd gather in the small living room, with warm blankets and board books. Adrian had developed a flair for dramatic bedtime readings, complete with voices and sound effects that left Hope squealing with joy, and Elena smiling in spite of herself. When Hope was finally tucked into bed, the adults often lingered, sometimes talking, sometimes simply enjoying the silence that comes after a day well lived. One night, as snow flurries drifted past the window, Elena turned to Adrian and shared a new idea she'd been working on, expanding the community center's outreach to include legal aid and early childhood support. Adrian, genuinely impressed, offered to connect her with some of his philanthropic contacts, not as a favor, but as a collaborator. "You're building something powerful, Elena," he said. "It deserves the spotlight." "And you," she asked, "what are you building now?" He hesitated. I think I'm learning how to build a life, not just a legacy. Something real. Something that doesn't disappear when the cameras turn off." They exchanged a long glance full of unspoken understanding. There was no rush to define what they were neither fully reconciled nor completely apart. What mattered was the space they'd created, one of safety, of effort, of love, expressed in small daily acts. Elena often thought back to that night in the alley, shivering, terrified, alone. It had marked the beginning of the hardest chapter in her life, but it had also led her here, to warmth, to healing, to possibility. As hope stirred softly in her crib, her tiny breaths echoing through the baby monitor, Elena whispered into the quiet, "We're going to be okay." And for the first time in a long while, she truly believed it. Their journey had been anything but easy, from betrayal to legal showdowns, from lonely nights on city streets to the glaring lights of a courtroom. Yet somewhere along the way, Eleanor Carter and Adrian Davenport found a fragile strength they never knew they possessed. Through bitter truths and hard-fought compromises, they discovered that genuine love goes beyond a lavish bank account or an ironclad legal contract. It's built on presence, understanding, and an unwavering commitment to giving Hope the life she deserves. As their story continues to unfold, one truth remains clear. No matter how rocky the path, redemption and new beginnings are always possible with courage and determination. He sneered at her maternity dress, chuckling under his breath as though she was a joke. Little did he know, within 24 hours, that same woman would hold the power to change his entire world. Would you believe that a single knock on her apartment door could turn a penniless, expectant mother into a landlord overnight? Yet here we are with an old key, an unexpected inheritance, and a twist of fate that would bind two sworn enemies under one roof. Prepare yourself for a tale of wounded pride, startling secrets, and shattered illusions, because sometimes destiny doesn't simply knock, it barges in unannounced. On a drizzly afternoon in Midtown Manhattan, Sophia Kim bustled her way into a cozy cafe on East 43rd Street. She gently tugged at her loose-fitting maternity dress, a fluttering pastel blue garment that had seen better days. Sophia was 7 months pregnant, and though her savings were meager, she carried herself with quiet determination. Each day she told herself that life's storms only made her stronger. As she entered Brew and Bloom, she noticed the cafe was filled with the usual eclectic crowd of city workers taking their breaks. A few well-dressed men in dark suits perched around a high table, sipping espressos as they exchanged hushed business talk. A group of college students hovered near the back laptops, open scribbling notes in battered, spiral-bound notebooks. Sophia joined the long queue, her swollen ankles protesting against standing for too long. She discreetly shifted her weight from one foot to the other, trying to balance her exhaustion with politeness. That was when she spotted a sleek black wallet slipping from someone's table and landing with a thud near her feet. She crouched a bit awkwardly with her pregnant belly and lifted the wallet. The sleek leather carried an embossed monogram NT. She looked up, seeking its owner, and saw a tall, dashing man with perfectly styled brown hair and an impossibly expensive-looking suit. "Excuse me," Sophia called, stepping forward. "Is this yours?" He turned, eyes scanning her from head to toe, lingering on her maternity dress. A smirk twisted across his lips. He grabbed the wallet from her outstretched hand, barely mumbling a thank you. Instead, he cocked an eyebrow. "They still make dresses like that," he said, voice dripping with amusement. Sophia's cheeks flushed crimson. She blinked, trying to steady her breath. Did he really just throw an insult at her unprovoked? Her dress might have been outdated, but it was all she could afford after patching together rent and medical expenses. She expected an apology or at least a polite nod, but none came. Instead, he motioned to the barista, apparently impatient for his double macchiato, and turned his back as though Sophia were invisible. The men around him snickered, focusing on the discolored hem of her dress. Sophia's eyes stung with tears, but she refused to crumble in front of a man who looked like he stepped out of a Wall Street billboard. Nicholas Townsend. She caught the name stitched on his briefcase, strolled away with his coffee in one hand and phone in the other, leaving Sophia behind as the cafe line inched forward. She couldn't help but overhear him bragging to a friend on the phone. "Yes, Dad's finalizing the deal with Morgan and Finch tomorrow. Once that's done, it's practically ours. But I told him it's a worthless old building. If it were up to me, I'd tear it down." She frowned, her curiosity piqued. What building was worthless in Nicholas Townsend's eyes? And why did his words prickle at her sense of justice? She tried to shake off the moment, focusing on ordering her decaf cappuccino, but the laughter at her expense echoed in her head. If only he knew who she was, or who she might become. Later that same afternoon, Sophia trudged home under a broken umbrella that barely kept the drizzle at bay. Her studio apartment was situated in a worn-down building on East 12th Street. Tiny by Manhattan standards, it was still her refuge. The paint peeled in the hallway, and the elevator frequently broke, but it was hers at least until her lease ended. Inside her apartment, a single flick of a switch illuminated the cramped living space. The sofa doubled as her bed, and near the window a small desk served as her writing nook, where she scribbled half-finished short stories in the hope of publishing them someday. Stacks of library books lined the wall. One, ironically, was Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a borrowed volume she'd hoped would inspire her to make better financial decisions. She had scarcely set her mug down when the phone rang. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number from California. A wave of concern washed over her. She rarely received calls from outside the city, and she had no family in California, at least none she was aware of. "Hello," Sophia answered. A calm, polite voice responded. "Am I speaking to Miss Sophia Kim? My name is Abigail Martinez, an attorney at Redwood and Bloom. I'm contacting you regarding a matter of inheritance from your late uncle, Mr. Martin Kim." Sophia's heart fluttered. Uncle Martin. She hadn't seen him since she was a teenager. He was a mysterious figure who had moved to the West Coast for reasons unknown, cutting off most contact with the family. Uncle Martin passed away. Sophia sank onto the sofa, unsettled. "I wasn't aware we'd even been in touch. Your uncle left very particular instructions," Abigail continued. "He had no children, so in his will he bequeathed his property in New York to you. Our records show it's a commercial building located in Lower Manhattan." Sophia nearly dropped her phone. A commercial building. In Lower Manhattan. She must have misheard. She thought Uncle Martin had been drifting from place to place, never settling down. "This might be a mistake," Sophia stammered. "I don't have the means to." "There's no mistake," Abigail assured her. Mr. Kim's wishes explicitly stated that the building and everything in it goes to you. I'll send the documents for your review. The property manager will reach out for further instructions. It seems your uncle trusted you to oversee it." Numb with disbelief, Sophia thanked the attorney and ended the call. Her mind whirled. She stared at her battered maternity dress, ironically, the same target of that arrogant man's mockery. She was unemployed, 7 months pregnant, and scraping by on her meager savings. Suddenly, She owned a commercial building. She couldn't sleep that night. Questions swarmed. How big was this building? Was it run down or worth anything at all? Could she possibly manage tenants? Part of her wanted to wake from what felt like a dream. Another part sensed destiny's hand at work, unraveling an entirely new path for her, one she never could have imagined a few hours ago. Morning arrived grey and overcast, reflecting the confusion clouding Sophia's mind. She received an email from Abigail Martinez containing digital copies of the will. True to her word, Uncle Martin had left Sophia all his worldly belongings, including a 4-story commercial property known as the Walton Building, located near the fringes of Lower Manhattan. A second email from the property manager Henry Paxton introduced him as the day-to-day contact. He requested a meeting at her convenience to hand over keys and discuss urgent matters. Sophia arranged to meet him in front of the building at noon. With a mix of fear and excitement, she donned her only decent coat, a second-hand navy trench, and took the subway downtown. The Walton Building rose before her like a relic from another era. Constructed of red brick with intricate stonework around the windows, it exuded a faint aura of old New York charm. The first floor boasted large glass windows and a sign that read, "Under renovation." On the sidewalk, a man in his late 50s, balding with a rumpled suit, waved at her. "Ms. Kim, I'm Henry. So good to finally meet you." He pressed a heavy bundle of keys into her hand. "I was surprised when Ms. Martinez told me about the inheritance. Your uncle was well an interesting man." Henry paused, looking at her swollen belly. "I'm sorry for your loss." Sophia offered a small smile. "Thank you. I wish I'd known him better. Can we take a look inside?" Henry led her through the wooden double doors. The ground floor was a vast, open space, with dust-laden floors, covered furniture, and half-demolished walls. The hum of a neglected heating system reverberated in the background. A single fluorescent light flickered overhead, giving the space a faintly ominous feel. He explained that the building's upper floors were divided into office spaces. A couple of the floors were fully rented out, though some tenants had short-term leases. The renovation on the ground floor was supposed to transform it into a chic cafe or restaurant, except Uncle Martin fell ill and everything came to a standstill. Sophia's heart pounded. This building was not worthless. It might be old and in dire need of repair, but Henry assured her it carried historical significance. Investors had even approached Martin about partial ownership in the past, but he never sold. They ascended to the second floor, and Henry pointed out several offices with glass partitions. "We have a few tenants here. The rest is vacant, waiting for renovations." Turning a corner, Henry pointed to a door with frosted glass and Townsend and Associates etched in gold letters. A sudden chill ran down Sophia's spine. The name Townsend jolted her memory. Nicholas Townsend, the arrogant man from the cafe. She swallowed hard as Henry continued his explanation, unaware of her reaction. "You'll want to meet your tenants eventually, but Townsend and Associates is one of the main ones. They have a lease until the end of the year." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. "Nicholas Townsend." Henry nodded. "Yes, him and his father Richard Townsend. They're a real estate investment firm. Rumor has it they were hoping to buy out this building from your uncle eventually. But Mr. Kim never budged." Images of Nicholas's smug, mocking grin filled Sophia's thoughts. She relived the sting of his ridicule over her dress. She could hardly believe it. The man who laughed at her was now her tenant. Her hand clenched around the keys, the weight of her inheritance growing heavier by the second. for the remainder of the walkthrough. Sophia listened intently as Henry explained plumbing issues, electrical faults, and future renovation plans. Yet her mind kept drifting back to Nicholas Townsend. She had never wanted to see him again, but fate had other ideas. The next morning, she returned to the Walton building to drop off some documents for Henry. She tried to time her visit so she wouldn't encounter Nicholas. However, as she entered the lobby, she heard raised voices reverberating from the second floor. "She can't just barge in here and change everything," a male voice thundered. Another voice tried to calm him. "Mr. Townsend, please just talk to Miss Kim." Sophia, heart pounding, climbed the old creaking steps. At the top, she found Henry pinned against a wall by Nicholas Townsend's searing glare. The difference between Nicholas's pristine suit and the dusty corridor was stark. "We had a deal with Martin." "Kim," Nicholas hissed. "Townsend and Associates was going to purchase this entire dump at a reasonable price. Now I'm hearing rumors that his heir inherited the building. Henry spotted Sophia at the landing and cleared his throat. "Mr. Townsend, let me introduce Ms. Sophia Kim. She's the new owner." Nicholas turned, face twisted in irritation. Recognition ignited in his eyes. His lips parted slightly in shock. Sophia couldn't decide if it was because she was the same woman he'd insulted, or because she was pregnant, or both. "You," he let out a mirthless laugh. "The woman from the cafe, the one with—" He gestured vaguely toward her dress, now replaced by a modest black maternity outfit. "How is this even possible?" Sophia stood straighter, ignoring the rapid hammer of her heart. "I inherited the Walton building from my Uncle Martin Kim. I'm sorry if this complicates your business plans." Nicholas scoffed. "Complicates? This building was supposed to be ours. We were in the final stages of negotiating with Martin. Did he not tell you that he was preparing to sign?" She glanced at Henry, who shrugged helplessly. "I have no records indicating a formal sale agreement. Only that Mr. Kim considered offers, but never signed anything." Nicholas's gaze bore into Sophia. "You're out of your depth. Are you even aware of the building's extensive renovation requirements, its compliance issues? Let me save you the trouble. Sell it to me." A swirl of conflicting emotions seized Sophia. Selling might be the easiest escape. She could use the money to support her unborn child, but something about Nicholas's arrogant tone stiffened her resolve. He thought her powerless and naive, someone easily manipulated. "I'm not selling," she said calmly, surprising even herself. "At least not right now. I need time to understand my uncle's plans and the building's potential." Nicholas took a step forward, his voice low. "The building needs more than your understanding. It needs millions in repairs. Do you have millions lying around?" Sophia refused to back down. "I'll figure it out." He sized her up as though assessing a formidable opponent for the first time. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Fine. You want to play landlord? Let's see how quickly you regret this." With that, Nicholas brushed past her and stormed down the staircase, leaving the air charged with tension. Sophia exhaled shakily, clutching the banister. Never had she felt so challenged, so determined. In a single day, she had transformed from an object of his ridicule to the one who now held the lease over his office. In the weeks that followed, Sophia immersed herself in the labyrinth of property management. With Henry's guidance and a stack of building inspection reports, she quickly realized the Walton building indeed needed substantial investment. The facade required restoration, The electrical wiring was decades out of date, and the plumbing threatened to fail on any given day. Between visits to her doctor for prenatal checkups, Sophia met with contractors, solicited quotes for repairs, and listened to tenants' grievances. She received a crash course in building codes, tenant rights, and real estate law. Her days were exhausting, but for the first time in months, she felt a sense of purpose. She was fighting for something bigger than herself, an inheritance that could secure her and her baby's future. Townsend and Associates, however, remained an unspoken threat. Sophia heard rumors that Nicholas was still pushing the idea of purchasing the building, even going so far as to hint that if she refused, he might rouse local inspectors to look more closely at code violations. The notion made her stomach churn. In the midst of this, she found unexpected allies among the building's tenants. A small marketing startup, Harper Innovations, run by a young entrepreneur named Melissa Harper, offered to help design promotional material for attracting new occupants if Sophia could lower their rent temporarily. A retired editor named Jonathan Brewster, who occupied a small office on the 3rd floor, volunteered to help her review complicated legal documents. "Your uncle was a kind soul," Jonathan told her one afternoon, adjusting his reading glasses. "A bit reclusive, but he had a great heart. He turned down many offers to sell because he believed the building had a historical charm worth preserving." Sophia, seated across his cluttered desk, smiled faintly. "I wish I'd known him better. He never stayed in touch after moving away. Why would he leave all this to me?" Jonathan set aside the papers. "Martin once told me he saw a similar spark in you, resilience, I think he called it. He said you understood hardship and wouldn't compromise easily." Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes. She pressed a hand to her belly, feeling a soft flutter from her baby. "I hope I can live up to that." Meanwhile, Nicholas was growing more impatient. Despite his father's connections, every effort to buy the building outright was met with a polite but firm refusal from Sophia. With no purchase agreement in sight, Townsend and Associates was forced to continue paying rent, albeit begrudgingly. One crisp morning, Henry summoned Sophia to the building for a pressing issue. When she arrived, she found Nicholas waiting in the lobby with a man sporting an official city inspector badge. A wave of apprehension washed over her. "Nicholas, what's going on?" she asked, trying to maintain composure. Nicholas's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We have a problem. The city inspector received an anonymous tip about possible structural concerns in the building. Given that it's quite old, I can't say I'm surprised." The inspector, a no-nonsense middle-aged man, cleared his throat. "I'm here to check the building's structural integrity. If we find any major issues, we might have to issue a notice requiring immediate repairs or even evacuate certain floors." Sophia's mind raced. If the building was deemed unsafe, she could lose her tenants and her only source of income. She shot Nicholas a suspicious glance, suspecting that he was behind the complaint. "Let's show him around," she said, softly, determined to cooperate. They embarked on a thorough inspection, stopping at each floor while the inspector examined beams, walls, and load-bearing structures. Tension brewed between Sophia and Nicholas with every hallway they traversed. She noticed that whenever the inspector looked uncertain, Nicholas quietly offered extra commentary about the building's age or recent mishaps. At last, they ended up in the basement, dimly lit by a single bulb. It smelled of damp concrete and stale air. The inspector circled around large metal support pillars with a flashlight. Sophia held her breath, praying that the building's bones were stronger than they appeared. After an agonizing half-hour, the inspector emerged, clipboard in hand. "The structure is old, but it's not immediately compromised," he announced. "A few areas need reinforcing, I'll detail them in my report. You'll be given a timetable to address the repairs." Relief flooded Sophia. "Thank you. I'll make it a priority." Nicholas's expression remained unreadable, but Sophia sensed his frustration. His plan to corner her, if indeed it was his plan, had fallen short. As the inspector left, Nicholas leaned in his voice, laced with condescension. "Temporary reprieve. Sophia, don't let it go to your head." She glanced at him, heart pounding with both fear and defiance. Noted. That evening, her nerves frazzled Sophia headed back to her apartment, only to find a thick envelope slid under her door. Inside were aged photographs, letters, and a note from Abigail Martinez. "Dear Ms. Kim enclosed are personal items belonging to your Uncle Martin Kim that might shed more light on his life and relationship with you. He wished for you to have these. I believe they hold significance, not just for the building, but for you personally. Warm regards, Abigail Martinez." Sophia spread the contents on her tiny kitchen table. She discovered snapshots of Martin at different stages of his life, working odd jobs, traveling across the country. There was one photo in particular that caught her eye, a much younger Martin, standing in front of the Walton building, smiling broadly, the keys in his hand. Tucked behind the photographs was a letter, dated a year before he passed away. "My dear Sophia, if you're reading this, it means I've left this world. I know we never got to know each other well, but blood ties are not easily broken. I saw your potential the day you insisted on visiting me in that run-down motel when you were just 14. You gave me some of your hard-earned babysitting money because you believed I needed it. That memory has never left me. The Walton building needs someone with heart. Townsend and Associates has tried time and again to convince me to sell. I refused. These men see buildings only as profit and loss. But you, Sophia, you see life differently. I believe you'll do what's right. With gratitude." Uncle Martin, tears welled up in Sophia's eyes. She gently traced the handwriting, recalling that day as a teen when she snuck away to see Uncle Martin. Her parents had disapproved labeling him the family black sheep. Yet she had felt compassion for him. Now he entrusted her with the building with his legacy, an act of faith she couldn't squander. Within days, Sophia began to see progress. With the help of a small renovation loan, secured through a local credit union, sympathetic to her story, she hired a crew to fix the most pressing issues. She couldn't address everything at once, but at least she wouldn't be slapped with an eviction notice from city inspectors. Word spread of a new landlord with big dreams. A few prospective tenants showed interest in renting out the vacant spaces once repairs were complete. For Sophia, it felt like a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos. Then one morning, she received an unexpected visitor in the building's lobby. He was tall, silver-haired, and wore an impeccably tailored suit. He introduced himself as Richard Townsend, Nicholas's father, and the founder of Townsend and Associates. "I'd like a word with you, Miss Kim," Richard said, holding out a business card. "It seems you and my son had a tense introduction." Sophia kept her guard up, but she led him to the small makeshift office she had set up on the ground floor. Richard glanced around at the half-finished walls. He spoke with a polished courtesy that Nicholas lacked. "We were sorry to hear about Martin's passing. He was a stubborn man, but I respected him." Sophia nodded, searching his face for hidden motives. "Thank you for your condolences. My uncle didn't mention you." He offered a faint smile. "We were acquaintances in business. My firm has had its eye on this building for some time. Let me be frank. The Walton building could become the crowning jewel in a commercial redevelopment plan. I've personally invested in the surrounding neighborhood for years. He cleared his throat. I'd like to propose a fair deal, more than fair, actually. We'll buy the Walton building from you, pay you above market value. You'll be set for life, Ms. Kim. No more dealing with contractors, code inspectors, or tenants. You can secure a wonderful future for your child. Sophia's heart thumped at the mention of her baby. She couldn't deny the temptation. A massive check would solve her financial worries, guaranteeing her child a comfortable upbringing. No more stress, no more struggling to patch holes in the building's roof. But Uncle Martin's letter flashed in her mind. He'd trusted her to keep the building from falling into the hands of those who only saw dollar signs. "Thank you for the generous offer, Mr. Townsend," she replied carefully. "But I'm not prepared to sell at this time." Richard leaned back, shoulders tense. "At least consider it. I can email you the details." "No pressure," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I only want to see you and your child thrive, and the building, if I'm being honest, demands resources you may not have." Sophia forced a polite smile. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm determined to see through my uncle's vision." He rose to leave, smoothing out his lapel. "Nicholas will be in touch then. If you change your mind, let us know. This offer won't last forever." As Richard Townsend exited, Sophia clasped her hands in her lap, shaky from the confrontation. She realized that the father was as formidable as the son, just more refined in his approach. The building was at the center of a high-stakes game, and she was the unlikely player standing against a powerhouse family. 2 weeks went by, and Sophia saw little of Nicholas, although she heard him occasionally barking orders to his staff from behind the frosted glass door. She focused on immediate repairs, patching up the roof, updating the fire alarm system, and ensuring the elevator met safety standards. She poured every cent of her small loan into these tasks. Yet progress was slow and costlier than expected. The baby's due date loomed closer, and exhaustion pressed down on her like a heavy weight. One afternoon, as she was reviewing contractor invoices, a gentle knock sounded at the ground floor office. She glanced up, expecting Henry or a tenant, but found Nicholas Townsend standing at the doorway, one hand in his pocket. "Busy?" he asked with an almost cordial tone. Suspicion flickered in Sophia's eyes. "Always." "What can I do for you, Mr. Townsend?" He entered, glancing around at the clutter of papers and renovation blueprints. "This is cozy," he muttered, less sarcastic than she anticipated. She set aside her work. "Spit it out, Nicholas. I'm sure you didn't come here to compliment my office decor." He chuckled wryly, shifting his weight. "You're direct. I suppose I deserve that. I wanted to discuss the building, specifically your finances. If you're strapped for cash, Townsend and Associates could hypothetically invest in the renovation." Her eyebrows shot up. This was a departure from his earlier threats and condescension. "Invest." He sighed, rolling his eyes slightly. "Look, I'm not the villain you think I am. My father wants to own this building outright, but maybe there's a middle ground. If we invest, we gain partial equity. You keep majority ownership, but have the capital to fix the place properly." Despite herself, Sophia felt a glimmer of relief. It was exactly the type of solution she needed to expedite repairs without taking on crippling debt. But she also knew that sharing ownership with Nicholas would mean giving him a foothold in decision-making. And from experience, she suspected that might lead to a hostile takeover eventually. She frowned, pushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "I can't just make that call without consulting Henry and maybe an attorney." Also, what's the catch? Nicholas's gaze flicked to her pregnant belly, then back to her eyes. No catch. Just a sound business proposition. If you manage to turn this building around and fill up the vacant floors, you'll see a steady income flow. If not, well, you'll at least have leveraged our investment instead of sinking alone. She bit her lip, torn between practicality and pride. Before she could respond, Nicholas spoke again, quieter this time. Believe it or not, I admire your courage. Most people in your position would have bailed by now. A swirl of emotions made her head spin. She had never expected a hint of respect from him. Confusion meshed with curiosity. Was this part of a cunning plan or a genuine moment? I'll think about it, she managed, keeping her tone neutral. He nodded, stepping backward. Take your time. But not too long. Construction costs aren't getting cheaper. As he left, Sophia realized her hands trembled slightly. Was an alliance with Nicholas Townsend even possible? Or was she risking everything by letting the fox guard the henhouse? In the midst of these negotiations, another curveball landed in Sophia's life. One evening, after a grueling day overseeing contractors, she returned to her apartment to find a single envelope in her mailbox with no return address. Inside was a brief typed note. Sophia, I heard you inherited a building. We need to talk. Ethan. Her breath caught in her throat. Ethan Cheng, the father of her unborn child, had left her months ago terrified by the prospect of sudden parenthood and financial instability. He'd vanished without a trace, ignoring her calls, texts, and pleas for help. And now, out of nowhere, he wanted to talk. Emotions warred within her: anger, heartbreak, curiosity. She'd come to terms with raising her baby alone, forging ahead despite the uncertain future. Did Ethan know she had come into a property and, like everyone else, suddenly see an opportunity? She wrestled with indecision. Part of her wanted to ignore him. Another part wanted answers, or at least closure. Finally, she dialed the number he had left at the bottom of the note. He answered on the first ring. Sophia, thank God. I've been trying to reach you. She almost laughed. Really? Because you did an excellent job of disappearing. He sighed. I'm sorry. Truly. Things got complicated. My mother fell ill. I lost my job. I panicked. She rolled her eyes, not sure whether to believe him. Now you're back. Yes. I want to help. I heard from mutual friends that you inherited a commercial property. That's amazing, Sophia. Think about what it means for our child. Let's meet. Her heart pounded with wary anticipation. Against her better judgment, she agreed to a short meeting at a nearby diner the following day. She spent the rest of the night tossing and turning, mind filled with swirling thoughts, the building Nicholas Townsend's investment offer, and now Ethan's sudden reappearance. It felt as though her life had collided with 1,000 diverging roads, and she was forced to choose which path to walk. The next evening, Sophia slid into a booth at Penny's Diner, an old-fashioned eatery with neon lights humming outside the window. She felt out of place among families enjoying comfort food, but she needed a neutral environment for confronting Ethan. He arrived moments later, wearing a worn coat hair slightly disheveled. He offered a small, sheepish grin. Sophia, you look well. She gave a tight nod, arms crossed protectively over her belly. Let's get to the point, Ethan. He lifted his hands in surrender. Fair enough. I've been doing some thinking. Running away was wrong. I realize that now. I want to be there for our baby, especially with all these changes in your life. You've got a building. I can help manage it." A bitter laugh escaped Sophia. "Wait, you want to help manage my building? You never so much as picked up a finance book in your life. Don't you recall how you panicked over paying half our rent?" He flinched. "I'm just trying to fix things. I messed up, okay? But this is a chance for both of us to start fresh. Maybe even as a family." She studied him, searching for sincerity. She saw desperation in his eyes, an echo of the turmoil that once drove him away. If he truly wanted to be involved, was it for love or financial opportunity? Sighing, she decided to lay it out plainly. "Look, Ethan, I'm not shutting you out of our child's life if you're serious about stepping up. But my building is a different matter. It's complicated loans, renovations, and a certain real estate mogul nipping at my heels." He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "A mogul? Are you in over your head? I'm good at dealing with tough guys. I can—" She held up a hand. "Stop. I don't need a knight in shining armor. I need stability. Consistency. If you want to prove yourself, start with showing up for doctor's appointments or offering emotional support. Right now, the building is my responsibility." Ethan pressed his lips together, fidgeting with a napkin. "Okay, I understand. But I just want to help." They talked for nearly an hour, hashing over old regrets and future possibilities. Sophia remained guarded. She had built an independent life since he vanished, and trusting him again wouldn't be easy. By the time they left the diner, it was clear that while Ethan wanted a second chance, Sophia wasn't sure she wanted to give it. Back at the Walton building the next day, Sophia felt the weight of her decision regarding Nicholas's investment offer. The building's repairs had already eaten up her initial loan. Future renovations would demand a larger infusion of cash, and time was running out. Several prospective tenants asked for guaranteed completion dates before signing long-term leases. Henry approached her with a stack of invoices. "We're behind schedule, Ms. Kim. If we don't pay the contractors soon, they might walk off the job." A sense of panic rose. She couldn't let the building stagnate halfway through crucial repairs. The baby was due in a couple of months, and stress threatened to overwhelm her. With her heart in her throat, she summoned Nicholas to her temporary office. He arrived promptly, wearing a charcoal suit that seemed to command the dusty space. She took a steadying breath. "I've given thought to your investment proposal. Would you mind explaining the terms in detail?" Nicholas raised an eyebrow, a slow smirk curving his lips. He pulled out a folder and laid out a plan Townsend and Associates would provide a sizable investment for the renovations in return for a 40% stake in the Walton building's future profits. Sophia would retain 60% and full managerial control, but major decisions like selling or converting the building would require mutual agreement. Her eyes scanned the documents. The terms were surprisingly straightforward, more generous than she'd expected. Then again, 40% was not a small share, and giving Townsend and Associates a foothold might open a back door for them to seize full control eventually. Nicholas leaned forward, voice calm. "If you want complete ownership, fine. Keep turning us down. But you'll never finish these renovations in time to attract high-paying tenants. By the time you do, you'll be underwater in debt. With our help, you could have the building up and running within months." Sophia sighed, the gravity of her situation pressing on her. "What if I'm still reluctant? Is there a chance you'll push me out?" He shook his head, a flicker of something, regret, maybe, crossing his expression. "Listen, I was rude at the cafe. Arrogant, yes. But this is a business proposition. If you manage this well, you'll have a stable income for you and your child. We'll have a valuable property in our portfolio. No schemes this time. The sincerity in his tone caught her off guard. She studied him, remembering how he had once laughed at her. Now he was appealing to her as a partner. Her mind spun with possibilities. Was Uncle Martin's dream worth sharing with the very people he distrusted, yet faced with unpaid invoices, code enforcement deadlines, and her baby's impending birth? Sophia felt cornered. With a trembling hand, she picked up a pen. 40% is high, she murmured, but I have no better options. Nicholas offered a short nod. Make a counter-proposal. She licked her lips quickly, scanning potential modifications. 30%. He paused, tapping a pen against the folder. 35. She narrowed her eyes, holding her ground. 32. After a tense silence, he shrugged. Deal. So they shook hands, forging an uneasy alliance. As she slid the signed documents into an envelope, Sophia couldn't help but feel like she'd made a pact with the devil, or perhaps discovered that the devil had a soul after all. The infusion of capital from Townsend and Associates worked wonders. Contractors returned, new crews were hired, and the building underwent a rapid transformation. Scaffolding enveloped the exterior windows, were replaced, and the ground floor cafe space began to take shape. A local artisanal bakery, Sweet Hearth, signed a lease for that space, excited to tap into the building's revitalized energy. Nicholas visited daily meeting with contractors or reviewing architectural plans with Sophia. They still clashed over small details, like the choice of paint color or signage style, but found a surprising rhythm in their teamwork. Melissa Harper's startup designed a bold marketing campaign, highlighting the Walton building's historic charm. Soon, the building's Instagram account drew interest from professionals seeking unique office spaces. Amid the hustle, Sophia balanced prenatal appointments and office calls. Her belly had grown rounder, making it harder to walk the building's halls all day. Sometimes Nicholas would offer an arm when the elevator was out of service, or discreetly bring her a chair during intense meetings. These small gestures caught her off guard, forging an unspoken camaraderie. Yet behind every successful milestone, a nagging worry simmered. Did Townsend and Associates plan to wrest control eventually? She kept a close eye on the finances, ensuring no unauthorized expenditures funneled money away. So far, Nicholas played fair. As renovations neared completion, the question arose. What about the second-floor offices currently occupied by Townsend and Associates? Nicholas had bigger ambitions. He wanted to expand his firm's footprint, occupying 2 floors entirely. This plan contradicted Sophia's vision of diversifying tenants. One late afternoon, they stood in front of a set of architectural sketches pinned to the wall. Nicholas pointed to the 2nd and 3rd floors. If we move Townsend and Associates into these floors, we can bring in new staff, ensuring long-term stability for the building's income. Sophia hesitated. You already have a suite? If you expand that significantly, we lose variety. Part of Uncle Martin's dream was to support small businesses. Nicholas frowned. Noble, but let's be practical. We'll pay top-dollar rent. The building's bottom line will skyrocket. Her stomach churned with indecision. And push out smaller tenants who rely on cheaper rents? He tossed the sketches onto a table. When has that ever been the responsibility of a landlord? You're in business to make money, not run a charity. Sophia's eyes flashed with anger. My uncle never saw it that way. He believed in giving back to the community. There's more to life than maximizing profit margins. Nicholas stared at her annoyance brewing. I thought we were partners. If you keep rejecting every viable option for growth, you'll bury yourself in overhead. She matched his glare. I'm not rejecting growth. I'm rejecting a monopoly that edges out the people who have helped me rebuild this place. Their heated words echoed in the near-empty corridor, tension thick as mortar dust. A thin line separated cooperation from conflict, and they were treading dangerously close to crossing it. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the Walton building turned uneasy. Contractors worked faster, finishing the new wiring and installing gleaming tiles in the refurbished lobby. Tenants moved in furniture, painting their offices in modern palettes. The building buzzed with anticipation for its grand reopening. Nicholas kept his distance, reviewing budgets and organizing Townsend and Associates' potential expansion without Sophia's input. Meanwhile, Ethan made sporadic appearances, trying to prove he was there for Sophia. She allowed him into a couple of her prenatal checkups, but wariness lingered between them. One morning, Henry rushed into Sophia's office. We have an issue. Nicholas placed an order for high-end elevator fixtures and is charging it to the building's budget without clearing it with you. Sophia felt her anger flare. She marched up to Townsend and Associates, ignoring the stares of staff as she walked into Nicholas's corner office. It was a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He stood at a sleek wooden desk phone pressed to his ear. Ending the call, he turned to face her. Is there a reason you're bypassing me for major decisions? She asked, voice trembling with barely contained fury. Nicholas shrugged. We needed updated fixtures. The old ones were cheap and didn't match the new lobby design. She slammed the door behind her. And you decided this alone. We're partners. Every major expense is supposed to be a joint decision. He set aside the phone, leaning forward on the desk. I was under the impression we both wanted the building to have a polished, upscale look. Or was that another pipe dream? Her hands balled into fists. Don't talk down to me. You're using your stake to force changes that primarily benefit Townsend and Associates, turning this into a high-end corporate environment, not the mixed business community Uncle Martin envisioned. Nicholas glared, color rising in his cheeks. Your so-called community is unsustainable if the building doesn't turn a profit. Look around, Sophia. Manhattan is ruthless. If you're not making money, you're losing it. She took a shaky breath, wanting to remain calm. I'm not opposed to improvements, but we discuss them first. From now on, you get my sign-off before any more purchases. He threw his hands in the air in exasperation. Fine, if this is how you want it. But I'm warning you, your idealistic approach might sabotage the very thing you're trying to save. Sophia turned on her heel and marched out. Tears threatened to spill not just from anger, but from the gnawing fear that he might be right. Despite their friction, the grand reopening arrived on a crisp autumn day. A ribbon-cutting ceremony took place outside the Walton building. The fresh facade gleamed the new sign reading, "The Walton Building Established 1922," in elegant gold lettering. Sophia stood at the center of the small crowd, her maternity dress now stylish and comfortable, chosen specifically for the event. Reporters from local news outlets gathered to cover the story of a young, expectant mother inheriting and reviving an historic property. The cameras clicked as she ceremonially cut the ribbon alongside Henry, with Melissa and Jonathan standing by. Nicholas lingered on the outskirts, conversing with potential investors, while Richard Townsend was notably absent. After the ceremony, guests strolled through the newly refurbished lobby, sampling pastries from Sweet Hearth. Sophia greeted them with a polite smile, though her mind remained partially fixated on the building's future. Among the attendees was a local historian, Barbara Green, who praised the preservation of the original architectural details. "The city needs more mindful restorations like this," she told Sophia. "Martin Kim would be proud." The words moved Sophia, reinforcing her decision to honor her uncle's legacy. She might have compromised by taking Nicholas's money, but she refused to let him overshadow the building's soul. Yet no sooner had the building's doors officially reopened than trouble came knocking again. A flurry of complaints about noise parking and permit violations hit Sophia's office. Some seemed exaggerated or outright fabricated. City inspectors loomed, investigating an alleged breach of historical preservation codes. At first, Sophia assumed these were typical growing pains, but she noticed a pattern. Each complaint seemed designed to stall progress or strain her resources. Who was behind it? Late one night, she received a frantic call from Melissa Harper. "Sophia, I found something you need to see," Melissa said breathlessly. "I was searching for a marketing contact and stumbled upon an email chain on the building's shared server. It looks like someone, maybe from Townsend and Associates, has been sending anonymous tips to the city about code infractions." Sophia's blood ran cold. "Send me everything." An hour later, she skimmed through damning emails, the sender's address masked through a dummy account. The tone was unmistakably urgent, fueling complaints about minor or non-existent issues. The final line in each email read, "We urge immediate action to halt all further renovations." Rage coursed through her. Had Nicholas orchestrated this sabotage, desperate to force her hand? Or was it another player in Townsend and Associates? She recalled how from the beginning, the Townsends wanted to buy the building outright, how Nicholas threatened to bury her in code violations. Now it seemed those threats were coming to life. Sophia's world was shaken when Melissa discovered anonymous emails sent from Townsend and Associates network, urging city inspectors to stall renovations. Furious, Sophia confronted Nicholas in front of his staff, slamming printed emails on his desk. He appeared genuinely shocked. "I never authorized this," he insisted. Though his denial seemed sincere, Sophia's trust was fraying. The sabotage aligned too closely with earlier threats, and while Nicholas promised to investigate, doubt lingered. Days later, amidst mounting inspections and accusations, Sophia's stress caught up with her, sending her to the hospital with false labor pains. While recovering, Nicholas visited with flowers and an apology. "One of our analysts sent the complaints," he admitted. "Claimed he was following orders, but I can't prove who gave them. My father denies involvement." Sophia listened skeptical, yet moved by Nicholas's concern. He insisted he had no part in sabotaging their shared investment and pledged to find the truth. The sincerity in his eyes hinted at a man torn between loyalty and principle. For the first time, Sophia sensed that Nicholas might be more than just a corporate adversary, perhaps even an unexpected ally. But one thing was clear. Someone within Townsend and Associates still saw her as an obstacle, and the fight to preserve the Walton building was far from over. As Nicholas quietly left the hospital room, Sophia stared at the ceiling, her hand resting on her belly, bracing for the next storm. At the boardroom of Townsend and Associates, Sophia faced Richard Townsend and his assembled executives. Calm but fierce, she listened as Richard proposed buying out her majority stake in the Walton building, offering a hefty payout and a promise to handle all future management. "You'll retain 10% if you like," he said, "and your hands will be free to focus on your baby." Sophia fueled by months of sacrifice, and her uncle's legacy refused. "I won't be bullied out of what I've fought to preserve," she said firmly. The room felt tense until Nicholas unexpectedly challenged his father. "You knew about the sabotage, didn't you?" he accused. Richard's cold warning, "Be careful whose side you're on," only solidified Nicholas's stance. Back at the Walton building, Sophia confronted Nicholas. "Where do you stand?" she asked. He looked torn, but resolute. "My father crossed the line. I'm with you now." The shift in his loyalty surprised her, but it also brought a sense of vindication. In the span of one brutal meeting and one honest conversation, the battle lines were redrawn. Sophia knew that danger still loomed, but for the first time, she wasn't fighting alone. Determined to protect her legacy, Sophia contacted attorney Abigail Martinez, who swiftly filed an injunction against Townsend and Associates. At the same time, Ethan urged Sophia to share her story publicly. With help from Melissa and journalist Reena Patel, a powerful article hit the New York Times expectant mother battles corporate giant. The public rallied behind her hashtags, trended community leaders voiced support, and tenants praised her integrity. Townsend and Associates faced backlash and falling investor confidence. Richard's tactics backfired, and for the first time, Sophia felt the tide turning in her favor. Amid mounting legal battles and media pressure, Sophia went into labor late one night. Ethan rushed her to the hospital, where she gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Mia Kim. Exhausted but overjoyed, Sophia held her daughter close, overwhelmed by the journey that led to this moment. Ethan stood by, visibly moved, and even Nicholas arrived later, with a quiet congratulations and a soft gift his presence, a comforting surprise. For a brief moment, all conflicts faded, replaced by the warmth of new life. Returning home with Mia Sophia found her cramped apartment barely suitable for a newborn. While she adjusted to motherhood, Henry and Melissa managed the Walton building in her stead. Meanwhile, legal pressure mounted against Townsend and Associates. Richard's sabotage scandal exploded, leading to internal turmoil. One afternoon, Nicholas arrived at Sophia's door with startling news. Richard had stepped down as CEO under the guise of health reasons. "He's out," Nicholas said simply, then added, "And I quit too. I can't work for someone who would stoop so low." Sophia was stunned. Townsend and Associates had been Nicholas's inheritance. Yet he walked away for integrity. He promised to stay involved with the Walton building, not as a corporate figure, but as someone who truly believed in its future. Cradling Mia in her arms, Sophia realized the tides had fully turned. Against all odds, she had protected both her child and her uncle's dream. The building and everyone tied to it was on the path to something far greater. Over the following weeks, tenants thrived. The building's occupancy rate soared, and Sophia officially moved into a modest but comfortable apartment on the building's top floor, her new home and headquarters. Ethan remained in Mia's life, slowly proving himself as a caring father, though romance between him and Sophia was uncertain. Nicholas visited frequently, advising on real estate matters. Their friendship, and possibly more, began to blossom, forged in the crucible of conflict. Uncle Martin's legacy lived on the old building's hallways, echoing with renewed optimism and the laughter of newborn hope. From a battered maternity dress to becoming the unexpected landlord of an entire commercial building, Sophia Kim's journey is a testament to the surprising twists life can throw our way. She navigated sabotage, battled corporate greed, and wrestled with her own uncertainties, all while preparing to welcome her daughter into the world. In the end, The once outdated Walton building found renewed vitality, much like Sophia herself, who discovered inner strength she never knew she possessed. If her story inspired you, if it reminded you that even life's harshest storms can lead to grand, unpredictable destinies, then spread the word. Like this video, share it with friends and subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of resilience, redemption, and unexpected fortune. Your support helps keep these stories alive, so let's continue celebrating the power of hope and courage, one extraordinary narrative at a time.